Hey everyone, welcome to the inaugural launch of our mobile game features report. We're here with Brett Nowak, who is CEO of Liquid and Grit. Hey Brett, how's it going?
It's great. It's great. How you doing?
Doing well. Just some background in terms of Brett's firm. So Liquid and Grit is a market research firm covering slots, casino, and puzzle games. And I think you guys are soon going to be covering RPG as well. Is that right, Brett?
Yes, super excited to add RPG. It's been fun playing a ton of RPG games.
Right. And just to give people an idea for you in the audience, what we're going to actually do is we're going to try and cover some of the key new features that have launched in the market. And so we'll take an in-depth look at some of the new features that have launched, but a lot of this stuff is identified by the actual revenue impact on the games that they're a part of. And so the three features we're going to be covering today, first is Bingo Blitz's Blitzy's Road Trip and Liberty and Roll, which are kind of simplified slots, mini games in Bingo Blitz. The second is called the Big Bubblegum Debacle in Candy Crush Friends Saga. That's a limited time challenge event. And finally, in Solitaire Grand Harvest, there is something called What's Behind the Curtains, which is a sales mechanic, but we'll go into that in more detail as well. So Brett, I thought we could first start by talking about Blitzy's Road Trip and Liberty and Roll from Bingo Blitz. And maybe we could just first start, like if you could share a screen, if we could just first start by looking at the revenue impact of both of these features.
The first thing is, as Joseph mentioned, was to look at the revenue impact of the features. And there are actually two features layered on top of each other during the 4th of July week in this app that we reviewed in Bingo Blitz. The first is Blitzy's Road Trip, and Joseph, excellent job on all the names because they're not easy. So kudos to that, to you on that. And then Liberty and Roll. And you can see in the graph here, revenue starts to increase with the release of the Blitzy's Road Trip, which is actually the bingo room that they released with a simplified slot machine. And we'll go into a little bit more detail of what the feature actually is in a second. But they first released the content, the new room, and then Liberty and Roll is a mini game event layered on top. And I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but it's during the 4th of July week, and we actually saw that all of the top grossing Playtika apps, which there are 4 in the top grossing list, 4 or 5, but a bunch, all released mini game events during this 4th of July break. So that's just a side note of that they all planned ahead and had mini games. And we'll talk about how we've looked into that analysis and how that's important.
And Brett, how should we be sort of interpreting the revenue increase here? Are these like, what would you typically expect for features to push in terms of whether it's week over week or a 5-day over 5-day increase in revenue?
Yeah, I mean, these are really strong results. You can see the data, the call out here in the actual report. And this data is from Sensor Tower, a great partner of ours as well. And we see, just looking at week over week, we see a 38% increase in revenue. And we call out in the report that there's obviously a boost from the fact that this is a U.S. holiday week.
Right.
So you're not contributing, this just alone for this feature, but it's a very strong revenue increase. I mean, you can see just if you look at this is a 90-day revenue graph, and this is the largest peak on those 90 days. So this is pretty strong revenue results. I mean, this is like when we're doing our analysis, this is a clear jump in revenue, even for a holiday, even when we're comparing all the other games that are released up on the holidays. And then,
would you say Liberty and Roll is a stronger feature than Blitzy's Road Trip?
Yes. Yeah. And I think we'll talk about we focus a little bit more on this analysis on Blitzy's Road Trip because we do talk about mini game events in other features, but I would say, yes, it is. I mean, in mini games, we've just seen be a very strong event system in casino, and we highly recommend it in other genres as well.
Okay.
And just to call out, we also do mention that they have a 90% off sale, but that was running for about a month, so that wouldn't have caused the spike in it. And we also call out any of the IAP package changes and any other releases in the reports. And for subscribers, they can click on those links and go directly to the feature database, which you'll see in a few seconds to see what those features are if they have questions or anything like that. Because one of our sort of philosophies is that we like to give all the information for you to make your decisions, in addition to sort of us making our recommendations for you.
Right.
Yeah. So would you like me to jump into?
Yeah. Let's look at these features.
All right. Just to confirm, you can see now the feature database with the video, right, Joseph?
Yep.
Okay, great. So again, we're in one of the tools that we have, Liquid and Grit, and you can see that this feature is an add-on. It's a bingo, is sort of a variation of the bingo rooms. And if you follow bingo games at all, you know that they release new type of bingo games often, like get a bingo by moving all of the avatars on the card like to the center, or get a bingo by getting all of the corners, etc. This is a new variation where they're adding a mini slot machine to the room, and basically the number of cards and the number of boosts added to those cards is going to determine what jackpots are added to the slot machine, or available for the player to win on the slot machine. So this is the tutorial video. When they're playing bingo, players are daubing any of the spaces, and any space daubed will start filling up this little note in the center space. And once that note is filled up, sort of an animation will fire off to the slot machine, and a player will have a guaranteed 2 spaces of winnings when they play that slot machine. And the slot machine is played after the bingo round. So again, we're just kind of walking through the tutorial. You see that note was added there. And then after the bingo round, they're going to go into a slot machine. And again, if you're familiar with slots, this is a respins mechanic, and respins is very popular in slots right now, and has been for some time since Lightning Link came out. And what that means is that players are going to press spin, and then the reels are going to spin. And if any prize lands in any of the spaces, the player is going to get a reset of spins, and you're going to see it here, back up to 3. And that's going to repeat until a player goes through 3 spins without actually hitting a win. And you can also see that it's pretty nice that players can win a whole bunch of different prizes in that slot machine. And then after they've gone through like basically 3 spins without wins, that will conclude their bonus round. So it's a simplified slot machine, but given the fact that bingo players are a little bit more knowledgeable about slots mechanics, it's a little bit more complex than sort of like the most simplified machine, which is, and I'll talk about this in a second, which is if you look at other examples of simplified slot machines, like in Coin Master, that's just a single line slot machine. So it's very, very simplified, which makes a lot of sense because they're going after a target audience that's most likely not knowledgeable of slots. This version of the slot machine is a little bit more complex. It uses a respins mechanic, and if you don't understand respins, you'll kind of wonder why the machine's not going forward, or it's getting you 3 and 3 more spins. So that's the feature. It's the first feature, and reload this. Safari did do what I thought it was going to, Joseph, but this is the second feature that, again, that you were highlighting is a stronger feature, in this example at least, is a mini game. And there's a couple things about this mini game. So this was the event layered on top, where players are going to earn rolls of a dice, and they're going to progress around this board, and where they land is going to determine the prize that they actually get.
Yeah.
And a couple things that this mini game is doing nicely. I mean, one is obviously it has a looping system. So in the top right hand corner, you can see missions, and missions are really just loops. So if you get through one loop, it's you completed 1 out of 5 missions, and when you get through all 5, you get an additional prize, and you get an additional prize for making 1 loop and 5 loops. The thing that we're seeing we're seeing mini games in general be very effective in driving revenue and engagement for casino apps. And I'll show you sort of the increase in investment games are making because of that. Two, mini games are becoming more of a freemium model. So, in this example, players are going to play, but they're always going to win. Like there are no sort of like negative, they're always landing on winning spots. There's other examples that we've written about where the first roll is free or multiple rolls are free, and then they only land on challenge spaces. So that's a nice shift in the minigame sort of development, is sort of this freemium model added to it. And yeah, so those are the two features in this.
And Brett, just so our audience understands, so how are these sort of mini games, bonus games driving additional revenue? Are they charging money? Like, what's the motivation behind players to engage in this stuff and drive additional revenue?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it depends on the player type. I mean, one of the reasons why mini games does so well is it hits on a couple different mechanics. I mean, one, it obviously hits on the progression mechanics. So you have the players that are interested in coming into the game, getting, feeling like they're accomplishing something. That's more of typically the sort of female persona types in both casino and puzzle, who want to escape sort of the stresses of life, but also want to feel like they're accomplishing something. So that's one. The other thing why it's successful is it's actually a strong mechanic for giving value to players. And so you're getting the more male audience players, the Money Mikes in casino, or the Gamer Garys in puzzle. And these are player personas that we at Liquid and Grid have actually created in partnership with a team in Finland who specializes in personas. But that group, who is much more interested in sort of like the value that they're getting, they're sort of more pragmatic about like what they do in games, like probably, Joseph, what you're more familiar with RPG and stuff, where they're interested in spreadsheets and things like that. Like, is this worth it or isn't this worth it? The mini games are giving players a lot of good value to complete. So those player types are also very excited in them. And then the third reason that these mini games do well, and a good example of this is also in casino with post-purchase mini games, is it's triggering that gambling mechanic in a lot of instances, where players want to have the thrill of winning, and the thrill of winning is created somewhat from the thrill of losing. And mini games are often a great system, either tied to the core loop or tied to post-purchase, which I think is a very effective way to drive revenue, where players have this opportunity to like win a huge prize, right? Because the odds of them getting that prize are very low. So you can counter it with a really big prize. And that's getting players really excited, because it's sort of like going to a real casino. It's somewhat gambling. It's a chance to win a lot of money. And when tied to the post-purchase flow, it's very closely tied to actual money, which again, if you're trying to give a player a thrill of winning, right after they spend money, that's when they're feeling like virtual currency is the closest representation of real money. And so when you're saying like, hey, you put $5 down and I'm going to give you 1 million chips, and then you're going to play this mini game to win 1 billion chips, in their head, they can very easily do that math, and it gets pretty exciting, right? They're going to put down whatever that math is. I can't, but they hopefully can. Anyways, so those are some of the reasons why they do so well.
Okay.
And I'm kind of jumping through a lot of stuff, Joseph. So you'll have to, the stuff that I look at every day, you'll have to slow me down if I'm adding too much information. But one of the really cool things that we have released is a data tool that basically one of the things it can do is show what game teams are investing in, like what is important to them, right? So when they're sitting around and saying like, what should we build next in terms of features and events and content, because we track these top grossing games, we can then in the data tool go look into it and kind of see like what is it that is important. And when we were looking at mini games, we again identified that Playtika, Slotomania, Bingo Blitz, House of Fun, and Caesar, so the four of their top 5 grossing released mini games during the 4th of July week. We went and looked into it, and we saw that Playtika top grossing slots apps specifically have mini games as the number 1 investment in events, right? And this is only events. Events are time-based releases, right? So they're going to be released on Monday and they're going to come out on Tuesday or whatever the time is. And you see that mini games is actually 2x increase in investments from 2018. So, and it's the number 1 investment for these Playtika apps. And so it's very important. And Playtika, if you know casino at all, has done very, very well in the last couple of years.
Yep.
In comparison, if you look at non-Playtika apps, top 15 grossing, they have actually challenges as the number 1 investment. Mini games is number 2, and it is growing, but it's not as important for these top grossing apps. And that might be a good thing if they're not trying to compete directly with Playtika, and it might be something that they should review in case they're not understanding like how valuable mini games are for some of these top grossing apps. So that's a lot of information on the first feature. I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking for a second, Joseph, because
no, I think that's all good information, and just kind of getting a feel for the amount of investment that different genres are putting in. I think it's a good it gives us a good view in terms of what is probably probably having the biggest impact in terms of those games. So it's good to see. I think this is a really good information to have.
Yeah, and another cool and also informative insight from this graph is that Playtika again, and I'm just going to assume that many of the people don't follow casino as closely as our subscribers, is like Playtika is typically known for their collection systems. I mean, if one of the better features released in social casino the last year or two has been the House of Fun Legends feature. It's a very like a collection character feature. And the interesting thing is that collections is their biggest feature investment, where they're investing the most in releasing new collection features into the app. But conversely, in events, collections is actually the 5th most important investment. So they're layering challenges, mini games, and quests on top of collection features. Whereas if you look at, again, non-Playtika apps, they actually have collections as the 3rd top. And I haven't looked into the features of that, but it's interesting that they're using events in the collection, using collection events, whereas Playtika is using collections as features and then layering non-collection events on top of that.
Right. It looks like in terms of top grossing apps that purchases has gotten a significant decline, although not so much for the Playtika specific slot apps. But what do you mean by purchases?
Purchases are really any event that's just like really driven around purchases. In fact,
is it more like sales, or is it something else?
Actually, we're going to talk about one in a second, but it's like make a purchase, and let me see if I have it. I have it right up here. This is a purchase event, and it is. Let's see here. So if you make a, let's see, you have to make a purchase to actually have it trigger, right? Okay. So here it is. If you make a $5 purchase, you're going to get 5 days of value. And you're gonna, or potentially 5 days. I can go into the details in a little bit, but this is basically a purchase event, right? You have to make a purchase for this event to have any meaning for you, right?
Would you classify VIP systems in purchase events, or is that somewhere else?
No, that's actually in rewards. And in fact, if you go to the appendix of the most recent reports, we actually did release a summary. This is a great question, Joseph. Not planted, but But anyways, we created our own taxonomy system, and basically we took the biggest feature buckets and tried to break them into sort of larger categories. And then we summarized it in the appendix, and we tried to make it universal because, you know, if you're a PM, and we didn't really give a background to me, Joseph, but I was a lead revenue PM at Zynga Poker, director of product at Blue Shell Games. So I know if, you know, you're going to release, let's say, a bank feature, which is like piggy banks or vaults, you're going to want to look at both casino and puzzle and RPG and every other example you can find that's driven revenue for that type of feature. So we tried to create universal taxonomy. And it's all in the appendix here, but purchases are anything to do with spending money on items in the app, really. So, you know, purchase flows, sales, purchase events, really, like, you have to make a purchase to engage it. You know, there are things that could go kind of either way, but for the most part, this works really well. We have the class collections are the obvious one, competition, banks, like I said, are pretty obvious. You save a percentage of your spend. So, yeah.
Should we move on to Candy Crush?
We should. Well, how long was that first one? Too long?
No, we're fine. You know, and for those in the audience, this is our first time, so we're still figuring stuff out. But hopefully, you're enjoying what you're watching. Learning. I'm learning. So.
Well, maybe they didn't know that, Joseph. Maybe we should have told them it was like our 100th time. They were like, that makes a lot of sense. This is perfect. Like, I mean, I don't know what you're implying here, that this wasn't, you know, a perfect dry run. Okay, yeah, we can go to the next feature. So, you know, this is from Candy Crush Friends Saga. We saw a pretty significant lift in revenue after the release of this feature. There was a limited sale also released during that time frame, which obviously helped in revenue, contributing to revenue growth. But we do see, like, you know, again, this is a 90-day window, and Candy Crush Friends Saga is a pretty stable app. I mean, we're talking about this is, again, iOS. I should clarify, this is iOS US only revenue. So we don't do outside of the US, and we're only going to look at iOS, but generally it usually carries over. But we feel like this is the most accurate data that we can use. And we don't see like a very strong lift in downloads at that time frame. So just looking at the actual feature, I will go through again the video. We're jumping kind of into the feature database, kind of like a little background music. But one of the cool things about this feature, I'll just kind of intermix some of the analysis with the explanation, but is that they added the events into the main level progression. And players have to progress through the main level progression just to get to the event levels. So it's a pretty effective way, or cost-effective way, probably a better way of saying it, to build in a engagement like driver without having to build an extra part of the feature, right, Joseph? I mean,
yeah.
Like, usually you have to build, like, do all these things, then you get to this place. What they've just done is just sort of like layered those event levels within the main progression and sort of said, like, here's event level 1, and then you've got to go do X of the progression levels to get to event level 2. The other interesting thing they did about this was that they actually made it so that you can only have one chance at the event level. So you get one chance and one chance only. And if you don't pass the event level, so I mean, just to again talk about the analysis of it. So here it says players win these special levels. You only have one try per level, but you won't lose a life. So I mean, that's pretty standard. You won't lose a life. You're going to get your own event currency to play event levels. I mean, that's a pretty standard mechanic. Only having one life is pretty unique, and it obviously drives players to spend more in the event, right? Like, they're going to want to finish this event because they know that they're going to have to now go back to the main progression level and go through all those levels to get to the next event level. One of the things we call out in the analysis is that if you're going to build an event system, have the amount of the sort of the cost of losing relative to the cost of sort of free play cost. So if it's like you get a lot of free plays, then you want to have the inverse of sort of the consequences of losing versus the opposite being true. If you have like no free plays, you want to have the cost of losing less. So they actually made it kind of extreme on both. So this is kind of an interesting event. But the other, and I'm going to jump to the next, so you actually play out the level. The other interesting thing about this is you have to complete one of those levels. And once you do, you get introduced to actually a team function around the event. So this was a pretty interesting design mechanic, because what they did was, again, they pretty cost effectively used just an engagement like goal for players to enter into teams, which obviously is important because you want to have players be engaged in teams. You don't want to have a team full of people who aren't engaged. But they built that into just the regular system where you have to complete one level to enter into the team. Then you're entering into the team, and you now want to complete this team goal after you finish the event levels. And just a side note, if you've been watching the puzzle market, teams and what we categorize as clubs has been a huge revenue driving feature for a lot of top grossing puzzle apps. It's more of a collaborative team system around lives, but it's been very effective in a bunch of apps, and we're expecting it to be released in a bunch more. So here is sort of Candy Crush is like entering into that, adding that to an event, and sort of seeing the impact it can have. I would just call out one other sort of feature as we're sort of combining the analysis and the explanations is if you're going to release an event or a feature that has a team element to it, what you obviously want to have, as I mentioned, was engagement from all the players. The other part of it is that you want to reward the heavily engaged players fairly, right? So if you have a whale, Joseph, we both know, like, you got to make those whales happy if you want to drive significant revenue. Well, if a whale joins a team and they're carrying all the weight of the team, and at the end of the event, each player gets the same reward, well, that's pretty lame for the whales, right? So what Slotomania did in their sort of version of clubs is they actually, once the team unlocked the group goal and we're going to get the group award, then individual players could continue to progress and increase and improve their like individual reward. So what you're looking at here is sort of like the informational page to just let players in Slotomania know that basically their current reward is this, and so the team has already unlocked the team chest, and this is their current chest level, and this is what they're going to get. And if they continue to progress, they're going to get better rewards, and that's again on an individual basis. So it's a nice system that rewards both like team cooperation and also like hardcore player engagement.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I would say the one other call out I want to make, and this again, we're jumping like into the feature itself, is I think this is like sorry, we're already in the report. I don't know, Joseph, you can comment on this as well, but in my experience, PMs, as much as they want not to project themselves onto their features, they often do. And what we're seeing in team-based events and features is like more and more creep into competition. And what we've seen when we've done player personas, and what I've seen when I've been a PM building leaderboards, is players are much less competitive than I initially thought. And again, I worked on Zynga Poker, which is considered a more competitive feature in casino than slots or bingo. And I found the same thing. I mean, players were IMing, chatting each other that they had a certain hands, their friends and things like that. And I would say, like, when you start thinking about teams, be very careful not to go too far into competition. You want to focus more and more on collaboration and reward strong individual play. But these are players that really, I think, want to avoid that feeling of just like defeat and losing. And they're doing that by choosing games that aren't like PvP at the core. So I would say just, a call out from our analysis of player personas and sort of my experience is just like be very careful about not adding too much competitive elements to the team events. This is really something that's about collaboration, with some type of achievement layered on top.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I think that even for PvP games like Clash Royale, for example, there's a huge segment of the Clash Royale audience that doesn't play 1v1 the PvP, and they do the 2v2 because it's a little bit more cooperative, a little bit less like head to head. And
Hmm.
so even in those games, it just comes down to understanding your audience and what they're trying to do. And Clash Royale also changed their reward system so that they used to try to funnel the quest so that it's like you only get these rewards for 1v1, but now they just open it up and they're just like, okay, people want to play 2v2, we'll reward that as well. But yeah, I think you're right.
I think that's a perfect example. I mean, I'm a big Clash player myself, and yeah, it's sort of like a more casual experience, right? It's like when you don't want to have that feeling of like defeat, or you're playing with, I mean, like when my kids are, over my shoulder and messing with all of my cards and like, totally messing up my game. Like, I don't want to be playing 1-on-1 and
Yeah,
lose, right? But 2-on-2, it's like, whatever, I
yeah.
mean, if my 2-year-old wants to throw some card out there that's totally ridiculous, like it's not gonna like be the worst thing in the world. I feel badly for my
Yeah,
teammates.
sometimes you just don't want to be judged, right? And it's if you're playing 2v2, you can always blame the other guy. Guy,
Exactly.
that guy sucks,
Exactly.
not me. It's that guy.
I didn't do it. And there's like so little consequence. So I think that's exactly the same mentality that's going on here is like, just be careful that that character on your shoulder as a PM, as we, we are, Joseph, is like,
Yeah,
doesn't get to win out, right? Like, all players want to win. Whales are, because they spend a lot of money, have to be achievers. And that's just not the case, and I already see that because we, again, follow the progression of features, and in clubs, like we already start seeing like leaderboards and things like that getting added to the feature. And I just think like if I were to invest in stuff, it wouldn't be on just strictly these like competitive features. It would be much more on the collaboration feature.
right.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
Okay.
I think that's like kind of most of the stuff. I mean, there's, we have a ton of stuff to talk about on all the features, but that's kind of the high level
Okay.
on
Should
that.
we talk Solitaire Grand Harvest? What's behind the curtain?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, let's see here. I think we caught up on time there. So I'm happy with that. I just get excited about features, as you can tell. And this is obviously a more spiky event. We only did 3 days over 3 days for the revenue spike because it was only live for 3 days. This was in a game that we kind of track the top grossing games like every day, but then as we get lower and lower, we somewhat just like look at the revenue data and kind of uncover stuff. And this was one of those things. So it was a short event, but oh, that's interesting. It's like going the different direction I'm sorry. It was a shorter event, but it's something that we see a lot more in casino. And I wanted to make our puzzle subscribers more aware of this type of mechanic because it's showing strong revenue results in casino. But basically it's you buy something. I just showed this feature. You buy something and then you get X amount of days worth of value and you have to come back into the app. So it's like a VIP package, in RPG. It's sort of the same in a lot of slots apps. I'm really looking at this top picture here because there's not much to it. You buy a package and then you come back in the app for 3 days, and each day you come back in, you get different value. And you must participate in an event, and then you have to come every single day. I was just actually doing an analysis of Rage's package. I posted about it on LinkedIn. If you're interested in checking that one out, I actually wouldn't mind pulling that up because they do an excellent job on that kind of package. But that's sort of what we're talking about here. I don't know why that keeps going back. Sorry. So I hope. Let me just show this example again, so that we can see another example of this type of mechanic, because this is a little bit more involved, but same feature mechanic, which is in this app, I think this is House of Fun here. Yeah. You basically make a purchase, and then what happens is they layered on top something. You contact the store, and then this is House of Fun, and you actually spin a wheel, and then based on what the wheel lands on, you're going to get that many days of value. So there's like somewhat of a mechanic, a gambling mechanic in here. So we've made the purchase here, and now we're spinning the wheel, and then we've just gotten awarded 5 days of value. And then you're going to see like what you, you spin the wheel first, and then you get to, then you get to actually buy the package after. So you get that feeling of like, oh, I got lucky. I get 5 days. That's better than 4 or 3 days. I should make this purchase. And then you can see on each day what value you're going to get. And you have to come into the app to actually collect that value. So we're seeing this be more popular and more complex in, implementations of it in casino. And we're now seeing it more prevalent in puzzle as well. Similarly,
I wonder if they think that players just are going to be waiting for that deal, right? Waiting to get a 5 before they purchase. But that, they'll just kind of come in there and get used to going to the store just to try out to see if they can actually get a 5 or not.
Yeah, and I wonder if it ever lands on anything but 5.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not even of 1 through 5.
Yeah. I mean, because we've seen other examples of that where we'll have like a pick'em game. GSN had a pick'em game like that where you sort of like select one and it's like, oh, you won the 90% off, and then the other two are like 10 and 50%. So I'm sure there's some randomness to it, but I gotta imagine it's weighted pretty heavily to 3, 4, and 5. Right. Similarly, when we talked about in what we're seeing top grossing companies invest in casino, we did the same for puzzle, and I don't have the data in front of me, but we're definitely seeing a much more investment in purchase events in puzzle. And Match Mansion, for example, has like really ramped up their purchase event investments this year. A couple other top grossing puzzle apps have too. So, if you're a revenue PM, or if you're interested in boosting revenue from your more mature players and want to have some systems to get like a 3-4 day boost, like you should come in and look at the purchase events. I mean, we can send you some examples of it. I'm going to show this one because this is actually one that I really like. And we actually released something similar to this in Farmville back a long time ago. But basically in Match and Mansion, you can buy this package with a tree, and then after you buy the package, you go and complete levels to get water to grow your tree. And then after you've grown your tree fully, you get additional value. So again, it's a package that you buy with an additional value tied to engagement. And that's really sort of the mechanic. Now, what is the engagement? Cool. In this case, it's just engagement. Like in the other case, it's retention, right? Where you have to just come in 3 days in a row or 5 days in a row. So this is an engagement type value. And on this one, they did a bunch of interesting things. I feel like they were pretty paranoid about the economy impact on this one. So they only priced it to $10. They only allowed players to buy one of each. And then they only allowed it 8 days. So they were a little bit worried about like what it was going to do, and probably for good reason. So it was much more of just a transaction mechanic than it was a revenue driving mechanic. But in Zynga Farmville, again, this was a while ago, we released one that was a year-long tree type mechanic. And I remember it did very well both in retention and revenue. So it's one of those unique features that drives like both engagement, retention and revenue, or engagement and revenue. In that it for, again, the high value players. So
it's funny how some of those old social mechanics like come creeping back and just like drive performance in games. It's like the idle games are doing like the quest progression stuff now. It's like it's back from the old social days.
Totally. I mean, it's funny. We should probably I should probably create something that does. I don't know how much value it has, but what is the other? We're seeing Mastery make a return. which like mastery in like 2012, 13 was like the rage. Like everyone had mastery. I got to put mastery in poker. And then like I haven't seen mastery in a while. I mean, I don't know that many mastery features that have come out in puzzle and casino that we've talked about. And now we're seeing a bunch of mastery come out. So yeah, it's funny how you see these like trends like come back and just come back and be popular. You know, I mean, they work, right? So yeah. So yeah, that
okay.
Nick, that was the sort of the third. I'm looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else, but that was the third feature that we wanted to. You know, and the only other one I wanted to call out on that was that again, this is a casino influence. I mean, very very strong examples of this, and we chatted about a little bit earlier. But post purchase, if you know, if you're going to do a purchase event, a post purchase sort of mini game mechanic, wheel gambling mechanic is very very effective. Play Studios is probably one of the best at doing this. They do it very frequently in pop slots. But again, I mentioned this before, is like right after you make a purchase, that currency that you have, the virtual currency, is the most closely tied to real money. If you layer a gambling mechanic on top, like it's pretty exciting to players. And so you make a purchase, and then actually in some of their apps, you have to make a second purchase for the post-purchase mini game. But I actually recommend that you just add it to the purchase. Yeah. From there, you play something that you could win huge prizes from, right? So for purchase events, and again, that isn't very popular in puzzle yet, but I expect that it will be relatively soon. So
yeah, no, that would be cool. Like, you know, you make a purchase and then you spin a wheel, and that gives you a, you know, like a variable coupon for another purchase, but you have to do it right there.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the feature that I released was that it was a high-low mini game, and you know, after you made a purchase, then you had a chance to play high-low, and then the high-low had a meter, and you know, you could win. It was something like 34 billion coins, but you'd have to guess 16 high-lows in a row, and that's obviously very hard. Well, after you finish that mini game, we added a button that was like, go back to the game or make another purchase. And that button itself drove a ton of revenue. So players were actually making a purchase, playing the mini game, and then pressing play again. And they would go back to the purchase flow, make another purchase just to play the mini game.
Yeah, you know, I think this is definitely an area where there's a lot of, it's like unexplored, or there's a lot more innovation that's possible. And, you know, I remember too, like way back in the day, I spent a little bit of time at Gaia, and there was like this betting mechanic where you make a purchase and then you can kind of go double or nothing, right? And then that drove so much additional revenue.
Yeah, I mean, because it's exciting, right? Yeah. I mean, that's basically real money, right? Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much as close as you can get to gambling on iOS is right then and there. And I mean, casino obviously just has their cousin is the RMG arm, so they know gambling mechanics. So I think, you know, in terms of innovation, I think casino is one of the top genres for just purchasing mechanics in general. Yeah. You know, the other thing is that most of these casino games kind of have their meta game and their core gameplay like pretty much figured out, right? It's slot machines, or it's poker, or it's bingo. Yeah. Right. So they're not like spending a ton of time trying to figure out like how are we doing all these fancy things. Although slots and all of these are very complicated, but it's pretty well known what they need. They have that team. So the PM team can focus, I mean, just on driving these like revenue bumps with these like hardcore mechanics. I mean, that was me in Zynga Poker for a year and a half. So,
all right. So someone in the audience release a double or nothing feature with a purchase and tell us how it goes.
Yeah, what was it? There was a feature that was released in Zynga Poker that was you bought a $99 package and then you would get a deal on the next one, but it wasn't double or nothing. I like that a lot better, man. That's way more exciting.
You might have some rage quitters too.
Yeah, you gotta. I don't know, those players don't quit that much. Yeah.
So of these three features, which one were you the most impressed by?
I mean, what am I most impressed by? I mean, I love this mechanic, the tie engagement to purchase mechanic. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's just something that is a big opportunity, and I think there's just a lot more there. I
yeah,
mean, we just
yep,
seen like glimmers of it, and we're like, hey, this drove revenue, and it's likely driving engagement and retention as well. And
yeah,
I've only seen so many examples of it, so I think in terms of like what I'm most excited about, that's probably one of the most exciting things is just that mechanic in general, just because I just feel like it's just not mature.
right,
It's like surfacing in a couple apps. We see it in Matching Man, we see it in House of Fun, like we're here, see it in a few things, but we see it in Farmville. But like that I think can be just way more developed.
right,
I think the second thing is mini games. I mean, we've seen just more mini games in casino. We haven't seen it in puzzles. So if you're a puzzle the PM, like that probably is pretty exciting for puzzle, just because like these mini games are very effective in casino. We're seeing a ton of investment of it. There's just a lot to do there in puzzle, and again, that's kind of like not something that we see a ton of in puzzle.
yeah. And if you think
Yeah,
about it
I'm
like
excited
that,
about all
like I think the people in the audience should be thinking about like so we're seeing like this huge investment in mini games. So what are the demographics of players that would be a good match for that, right? And so like one thing I can think of off the top of my head is idle, right? So like you should be putting in kind of sort of visual progression markers that if you hit this, then you can play some kind of mini game or something like that. I bet you it would do really well in idle.
of them. Yeah, and I actually think an idle post purchase mini game would be super cool too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
something that was playing in the background,
Yeah.
that they didn't get the reward right then. You know what I mean? Like if they made a purchase and then they turned on an idle mini game, and then the idle mini game took like 5 days to like play, and they could come in and check it, or maybe they could tweak it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's sort of like tying two of those features together, Joseph. It's pretty cool, which is like you add the mini game, it has engagement, and the engagement, you have to kind of come in every day. You're rewarded for coming in,
Yeah.
and then your final prize is random plus engagement.
Right, right. Or the other thing you could do is for like games that are highly ad driven, like with ad whales, where you have like for every ad you watch, it fills up a meter. And then once you like watch 10, 20 ads, and the meter fills up, then you play the bonus game or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'd honestly say the third is the simplified slot machine, just because, like, I mean, we've just seen that outside of slots, and
Yeah.
now and with CoinMaster, and I mean, I think this is just kind of another supporting support for the value of sort of a simplified slots
Right.
machine. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Excited about them all.
anyway, I think that's it for features. But just for the audience out there, to get to know a little bit more about Liquid and Grit, Brett, like if people are interested in if you want more information, more like specific information about this stuff, I personally have used Liquid and Grit for a long time, think it's awesome. Where can they get more information about your service?
I mean, yeah, liquidandgrid.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Brett Nowak, spelled Nowak, Nowak, and just ping me and I can send you an example report. And like we talked about earlier, we're coming out with RPG next, so we're pretty excited about that. I can, just kind of show you what we do.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, Brett.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay.